when people have the power to decide what is acceptable, what is right, what is good, they have power over other people. And that's really what this is all about. In 1991, a woman from the South hung a Confederate flag in her window at her Harvard dorm. Some black students thought this was an attack on them, and they were angry and they protested. One of them decided to hang a swastika in her window as a protest. The Jews got mad, and she took it down. I don't know who's right or wrong in this situation, but I do know I think everyone involved is an asshole because they went to Harvard. So the Confederate flag in this case is a symbol, and what we're going to be talking about today are symbols, and these are non-literal representations of something else. The Confederate flag to the woman from the South probably represented her Southern heritage, whereas to a lot of the black students there, it represented slavery and when their ancestors were enslaved. So, who gets to decide, basically? But why? And what does the symbol actually represent? And who gets to decide? And what does it say about our culture when we accept certain symbols, elevate others, and deny that others exist at all? I'm Sam, and this is the Illegitimate Scholar Podcast, the weekly cultural anthropology and history podcast that makes sense of our senseless world through indigenous and historical examples, academic methods, and social science in a perspective not limited by the crushing restrictions that come with traditional academia and public schools. So the first question that I'm going to answer just right off the bat immediately is, what does the Confederate flag represent? And the answer is, it depends on who you ask. And that's true of any symbol. So if you're hearing this and you're thinking, no, it's definitely not racist, or if you're hearing this and you're saying, no, the Confederate flag definitely is racist, I got to tell you that, yeah, that makes sense, but it's not the only thing it represents. That's just what you think it represents. And I understand that. There's a good argument that it represents that. But all symbols have different meanings to different people. A cross represents something very different to modern Christians than it would have in Rome, when it was just a way that they used to execute people, and then it was co-opted by the Christians when Jesus gets crucified. I don't really know how that happened. Seems a little odd, but regardless, whatever. Trying to make the root of this episode is essentially that when you or anyone tries to give a symbol a true, immutable meaning, not only are you assuming the motives of other people and you're assuming their intent, but you're also placing your values over theirs. And it's inherently a lack of understanding. And sometimes somebody has the Confederate flag because they're racist. But there's plenty of times when it's a symbol of pride for them that, they don't play up the racism aspect of it as much. And I think that especially people from the North often don't seem to understand that. And I think that comes from, to be honest, a lack of empathy. And we're going to talk about that a little more, but we're going to talk about other symbols too, and why it maybe doesn't make sense to just decide that the Confederate flag is immutably racist, or any symbol is immutably anything. I mean, the point of the symbol is not, it's like, if the symbol was racist, you would just say that flag is racist. Like, the flag itself would just be like, racism is good on it. And even then, symbolically, the different words might have different meanings to different people. The definition of racism has changed over time. People today are talking shit about prejudice plus power, even though the word racism actually comes from the guy who wrote The White Man's Burden, deciding that Native Americans who didn't want to assimilate to white culture were racist. And that definition of racism, which is, again, the first use of it, that's not what we talk about it today. In fact, it's in spirit sort of the opposite of that. So what are the symbols and how are they treated? So we got the American flag. We're going to come out hot with the American flag. It's cool in America. I love my American flag. It's, what if you had an American flag in Iran, though? In Iran, an American flag, I think it could get you arrested. I don't know. I'm not going to assume that for the Iranians, but like Iran, Syria, Libya, Iraq, North Korea, if you have an American flag in those places, how are you going to be perceived? It's different. It's circumstantial. It's based on different places. To many people in the world, and for good reason, the American flag represents death, detention, destruction of their homes and culture and people, and descent into chaos. And that's as fair as the Confederate flag being called racist. But for whatever reason, that's really the thing. For whatever reason, what's the reason? There's reasons, there's plenty of reasons for it, but why is the American flag acceptable and the Confederate flag isn't? And again, it's circumstantial. I saw on the internet recently they found a Confederate flag this is actually what sparked this. They found a Confederate flag in like Norway, some Nordic country, and they took a picture of it, put it on the internet, and they're like, "Oh, this was so racist. I saw this, and I told the guy that this was racist. This would be considered racist in America." And the guy just said, "This isn't America," and he walked away, which I love because Americans love to assume that they're like the middle of the world and that everything is about them. And, you know, that's not true. It's just not true. Um, so yeah, you got the American flag. You also got the 13 star flag, the Betsy Ross flag, which some people have called racist before. I have one hanging up downstairs. And I had like one of my former roommates brought over a liberal college white girl taking gender studies classes and all this shit. And number one, she asked if it was a Confederate flag first. Because I guess she doesn't have any idea what a Confederate flag looks like. But even when my friend told her, no, that's just an early Betsy Ross American flag, she was like, that's racist because they had slavery back then, which is nonsense. It's nonsense. British flag, similar thing to the American flag. You got that damn Union Jack. I don't like it. I'm Irish American. My mother's basically a potato. I'm not going to tell you her name, but it's Irish as hell. Okay. And the British committed genocide on the Irish under that same flag at the same time that they were doing colonialism. 800 years of oppression on the island of Ireland at the hands of the British, many of them under that exact flag. But you can have it. It's not going to be offensive. So why this empire that colonized essentially the entire world, why is their flag not offensive? Because it's offensive to some people. There's a lot of Hindu nationalists in India that don't like that shit. There's lots of people across the world. There's plenty of Irish Americans who hate the Union Jack. Lizzie's in a box. She's in a box, and I'm happy for it. Yeah, Lizzie. The queen is dead. The king. The Confederate flag. Look, I've spent a few of my years in southern states in the United States, and I've met racists in the North and the South. And from the Southern perspective, that flag represents history and remembrance of some of their literal ancestors, pride of their region, which, by the way, is underrepresented in media quite a lot, and it's often made fun of. If you notice that mainstream America, like mainstream things, they just make fun of the South. It's acceptable to make fun of the South. And at the same time, they tell them that you can't have this symbol. They're trying to tell someone else what their symbol represents. I wouldn't let anyone tell me that an American flag represents something other than it does to me. Obviously, I totally understand that that flag represents death and destruction to many people, and I talk about that quite a lot. But to me, it's a symbol of my country. And regardless, I don't like the government that did those things. But if that flag represented that death and destruction to me, then I wouldn't have it. To me, that, the CIA represents that, not the American flag itself. And then from the Black perspective, of course, the Confederate flag to a lot of Black Americans is that this flag represented a country that was started, at least in part, a large part, to keep Black people enslaved. And it was all like, and they had slavery for the entirety of their existence. Okay, I get that. Although, America does things today that are as bad as slavery, I would argue. Saudi, rather. They arm Saudi soldiers that use NATO weapons to commit genocide. They destabilize Libya, not just the Americans. The French had a big hand in that. America participates in a lot of things that you could consider very, very bad, including the open slave markets in Libya that were created in part by American destruction of the old government, Gaddafi. Who, by the way, Gaddafi gave up his nukes in the 90s with the promise that he would not be attacked. And then he was. America still breaks treaties. It's not just in the 1800s with the Native Americans. They still break treaties. And when I see, look, I get the argument that the Confederate flag is for racism, but the fact is that is just one argument. It's a good argument, but so is the argument that the British flag is the British flag is offensive. The American flag is offensive. All these arguments are good arguments. They're all good arguments. But the fact that certain arguments are elevated over others by certain people shows who has the power. And I really, in your daily life, please remember this and pay attention to what symbols are allowed to exist, what symbols are not allowed to exist, what symbols are pushed forward. For example, you see rainbow flags on uniforms of sports players. You see them out on state buildings, but you're not allowed to see other certain symbols there that you can't have. So since everything is offensive to somebody, deciding any symbol should be universally condemned means elevating the perspective of some overall. So when you take a symbol, when anyone takes a symbol and they decide this is what this symbol means, there's an extreme power over someone else in that situation who maybe believes that that symbol represents something else. To them personally, that symbol represents something positive, but they're being told that that symbol represents something very negative, and they're not allowed to have it. They're not allowed to wear it. They're not allowed to have it out. But then other people have symbols that that same person might find offensive. But because the right people don't find it offensive, it's not banned on college campuses or it's socially acceptable. And honestly, you can see a lot of who has the power to decide what is acceptable. And when people have the power to decide what is acceptable, what is right, what is good, they have power over other people. And that's really what this is all about. No one's out here with a checklist being the czar of whatever, deciding what is okay and what isn't broadly. But in the culture what is not okay to have and what is okay. Okay. It's not just black people that have to code switch. If you're not from like upper middle class life and you're trying to exist in a decent, good college, then you have to adhere to the social norms of those wealthier people. I mean, that's something I've had to do in my life. Um, and then obviously there's specific institutions that ban and elevate certain things. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So a swastika, talk about some other symbols for a moment. You can't have a swastika in America or Europe. And in Germany, it's illegal. In America, you're just going to be ostracized, which, I get it. With the Confederate flag, it's like, yeah, it is their heritage. I get it. It's a whole thing. And I try not to pass judgment because it's not my heritage. I'm from the North. I'm a New Englander. If someone tried to tell me I can't have a New England flag because of the genocide of Native Americans, that literally the New England flag, which is a red banner with a green pine tree in the top left corner. You can see it at New England Revolution soccer games. If someone tried to tell me that I can't have that flag and that it represents Native American genocide, which would again be as good of an argument as the Confederate flag one. Like this was a flag that was raised in annihilation wars that I would describe as genocide against Native Americans. And I love Native Americans, and you guys know that. But I also love New England. I love that symbol, and it does not represent Native American genocide to me. So if someone told me you can't have that flag, it represents Native American genocide, I'd say, nah, go f yourself. It's my symbol. It's my heritage. You. So I get it when the Confederate people say the same thing. There's other people deciding what is okay and not okay for you when they're different than you. Frustrating. And that's what we deal with all the time if you have opinions that are outside the mainstream. And symbols is just one way that this is done. Okay. Also, hey, I'm sorry. I'm 2 weeks late and I'm a day late after that 2 weeks. I've been dealing with some shit, but I'm back on the wagon now. Coming out here swearing a lot. Gonna have to leap out quite a bit. All right. You can't even have a swastika that's from a different culture besides the German swastika. You got some Hindu swastika that's like a different swastika that doesn't represent that. You can't bring that out in America. People are going to get mad. They're going to get real mad. Even though it has nothing to do with that. You can't even have an iron cross. It's a World War II German symbol. If you're a German American, you can't really have your culture. Number one, the German American, this is a whole thing. German American, the ethnicity is huge. It's like number 2 to English ethnicity in American stock, in American white stock. And the culture used to be prominent in the United States, but it was kind of very much subdued during World War I. It was kind of already gone by World War II, to be honest with you. So there wasn't much more left to do. But that's one of those things where it's like, look, we're with the Germans. So you guys are Germans. You might be second, third, fourth generation German Americans. You're still doing German shit. Stop doing German shit. And it happened. It's a travesty because if that wasn't the case, you'd be able to like if you go up to New England, there's lots of Irish things. There's lots of if you go farther north, there's English. There's remnants of these cultures that are still around. It's not true in the Midwest where the people are German. There's not as much of it. All right. So you can have a swastika, or you can't have a swastika, but you can have a hammer and sickle. Communism is fine. Communism gets nuance. So you're allowed to have a hammer and sickle on a college campus. You can't have a swastika. Nazis were worse than the Soviets somehow. Soviets were on our side. So it's okay. You know, the only things that get nuance are the things that we decide, the people that rule over you, the people that own these institutions. And look, you can try to say that, yeah, Nazism is worse than communism. And again, there's an argument. But if you're a Cuban American, if you're an Eastern European, if you're a Central American, if you're a Chinese or a Taiwanese American, you might think very fucking differently about that communist symbol. And it might be a reminder, the same way that a swastika is, to Jewish students that got mad when this black girl put up a swastika. And I'm sure that some of the black students in response were like, well, why are you so mad about the swastika? You guys didn't care when the white boy put up the Confederate flag, but you're out here standing up for yourself. You want like, I can see the argument there. I don't know if that happened. This was 1991. I wasn't around, but I'm sure it was really dumb because these are all rich, overprivileged kids. Like the black girl that put up the swastika, she's a judge now. I'm sure she's a fantastic person, especially because I think that that's hilarious that you got mad about a Confederate flag, so you put up a swastika. I think it's a good point. It raises, that's really like where it comes from. It's like, you know what? I'm going to have a swastika. They can have a Confederate flag. And I'm unironically, it might sound sarcastic, I'm with her. I get it. Like, it's kind of, to me, it's either all the symbols are allowed or none of them. And frankly, there's a better reason to have a Confederate flag than a swastika. But like, you know, at the periphery, you're always deciding for someone else what it means. Yeah. So what's the criteria? What's the real criteria for what you can and can't have? Because the Confederate flag you can't have because it represents slavery, but you can have a Betsy Ross flag, at least for now. You can have a British flag, even though they were colonizing everybody. You can have an American flag. America had slavery. You can have a New England flag. So what the is the thing? The swastika, they committed genocide. The Germans committed genocide with the swastika. It was really bad, but you know, so did Turkey. Turkey committed genocide on Armenia a couple times. They still with them today. No one's going to get mad at you for having a Turkish flag. What's the difference? And why are certain symbols like this? And it comes down to cultural pressure. But this kind of pressure comes from people with power. These are people that run the institutions. This isn't a deep state Jewish conspiracy, by the way. I'm saying the people that run the institutions. I'm saying not the people, as in they're one group of people. I'm saying that, well, there is overlap of the type of people. These are obviously like rich, capitalist class people. But these are the people that run the institutions. They run in the same circles. The people that run the colleges, governments, corporations, NGOs, like the ACLU, people who run the media. Again, not saying the Jews run the media. Kyle does. Kyle Broflovsky runs the media, but the Jews don't. Okay. For countries, it matters what a country thinks. If France is offended, it matters way more than if Albania is offended. If India is offended, it matters a lot more than if Tanzania is offended. No one gives a shit what Tanzania thinks. I bet most of you, and you guys are listening to a social studies podcast, you can't point out where Tanzania is. I don't know if I'd be able to. I think I vaguely know what the shape is. If I looked at a map of Africa, I might be able to get it. But no one cares what they think. No one cares about the Serbs killing the Albanians. You can have a Serbian flag. Most people don't know about that, even though it just happened in the 90s. So the point is that it's not really always reflective of what people actually think. And I'm gonna talk about this with a few more examples. Let's talk about Pepe the Frog over on Frog Twitter. I know some of you, especially those of you who are over here from the Good Old Boys podcast. Some of you also listen to them, and some of you are involved in Frog Twitter. I am too. I love that little frog. I think it's cute as there are certain people, and not me, who are white supremacists, whatever, far right people who have that frog. I've seen it even on Twitter. But the vast majority of it is just nice, wholesome shit with a certain amount of vaguely right wing stuff, but like family values, Christianity right wing, not like, you know, euthanizing people and putting people in camps right wing, not that kind of right wing. But that was enough for the ACLU and a different one of them, the ADL, I think, to declare Pepe the Frog a hate symbol, even though it's a vast minority of the use of that symbol. Because of the specific people who saw it, they made it into a hate symbol. And, I've seen the documentary, just this apolitical artist who just created this story about a frog, a character that's based on him personally. And it's just out there chilling. And he's trying to make money off of this really popular symbol that he created, and he can't do it because it's called a hate symbol by these institutions. Yeah, feels bad, man. There's a whole documentary on it. It's pretty good. The OK sign. You guys remember that? The OK sign with the three fingers, the one that like the Covington High School or whatever, those Catholic high school kids who were like staring at the Native American dude, that was like turned out to be like a whole big not a thing. And there were apparently like Hebrew nationalists around that were like telling them they're white devils and shit. There was a whole thing. There was a whole thing. But they were seen doing the OK symbol, but they were doing it for 3 points, 3-pointers, because some of them were basketball players. And that's what they do. Dwight Howard and shit. They're out there throwing threes. Dwight Howard's so old. I don't watch basketball. I used to like basketball. I like playing it. Look, but the OK sign, like, somebody just decided that that meant white power, and then it was like a joke, and then it was like, oh, white supremacists actually use it. It's a whole thing. Okay, you guys get what I'm saying? It's a whole thing. But the institutions decide what that symbol means, and then they try to tell you that's what it means, and that any use of it is that. They try to control what people think about a symbol that other people use and decide for them what the value is. It's all about controlling what other people think and what they can and can't do. That's what it comes down to. And the people with the most power, they can do whatever the hell they want because the stuff that they want to do is allowed. And they want other people to adhere to their rules and adhere to their values. That's why they paint a symbol as meaning something because, oh, it means something else to you. That's too bad. Oh, the American flag offends you. That's too bad. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that your family was killed by a drone strike. Go yourself. Confederate flag's bad. American flag's fine because I said so. So, the rainbow flag. You try having a negative opinion about that rainbow flag. You come out and you say that that rainbow flag represents the indoctrination of children into an ideology that makes $1 million for the pharmaceutical industry while they are sterilized and mutilated. Because that's the, I'm not saying that's what I think. I'm not saying that's not what I think. But I'm just saying that that's what certain people feel about that rainbow flag, that it represents an evil subversive ideology. And again, there's a good argument for it. But not only is it a symbol that's pushed out to people and it's decided that it means acceptance and love and accepting everybody and it's all cool, regardless of the negative aspects that can be associated with it. It's seen in the mainstream as something that has to be considered acceptable. That guy EJ Hardazek, whatever, he's a NHL commentator. I don't remember his exact name. He has me blocked on Twitter. Because he's that guy. He told a Russian immigrant who just didn't want to wear the rainbow flag. They were trying to make all the players wear it. He didn't want to wear it. He didn't say anything negative about it. He just said, look, it clashes with my religious beliefs. That symbol to him from a different culture meant something differently to him than it did to EJ Hardazek, the NHL commentator who's a xenophobic scumbag. So if you agree with the mainstream ideas of the state and of the government, of the people and authority that tell you that the rainbow flag is a good thing, the same people that want to force people to wear that symbol on their body and decide what it means and who can wear it and who should wear it. He said on TV that this guy should go back to Russia and fight in the war. Can you imagine if Ben Shapiro said that shit about anybody? But because it was this guy saying it for this reason, it was okay. Because it was against a guy who who just didn't want to wear it. He didn't have anything against it. He just didn't want to personally wear it. It's okay for him to come out and say, "Go back to your country. We're full. Go back. We're full." It's like some right-wing ass shit to say. But he's viewed as a member of the left, and he's viewed as okay for this. He didn't get suspended. He didn't get a talking to. He didn't get shit. He got a few people giving him shit on Twitter for a few days. I kept doing it for a few weeks, and then he blocked me. And I don't blame him because I kept doing it. I'm surprised he took that long to block me. I'm not saying we're going to talk about words. We're talking about words. Words are symbolic. They might not be symbols, but they're symbolic. It's my favorite word. I'm sure my Taco American listeners are going to love this one. Let's talk about the word Latinx. Latinx, and if you don't use it, you are a racist. Latinx is the term that some of you may or may not have heard of that is used. It's the primary term used to describe people from Latin America in the United States. And this is the term that you would see at a college from an HR department. It is the official word that comes down from the very top. I don't know who decided it. Maybe it's the priests at Harvard and Yale and at the Ivy League colleges that decide what we are not allowed to say and what we are allowed to say and how we should speak. So that's what they do. And obviously, when I say priests, I'm actually talking in metaphor here. I'm talking about the professors. But this is effectively what they are. They have a religious devotion to this type of thing. So even though Hispanic and Latino are much more preferred, Latina are much more preferred terms for people from Latin America, and only 4% of Hispanics, which is the real preferred term from the people themselves, only 4% of Hispanics in a Gallup poll from, I think, 2021 prefer this term. It's still the preferred term in college. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. The point is that it comes down from people in the universities. And I remember when I was in college, I had my specific professor wrote something about Latinx. He wrote that, like, yeah, so some people have said that, a lot of Latinx people don't like the term, but we spoke to a Latinx colleague, and he agreed that it's the right term. Yeah, you dumb motherfucker. He has gone through the same indoctrination and training that you have. That's why he did it, because that guy, he might prefer Latinx. Maybe he does. I don't know. But even if he doesn't, he's probably smart enough to know that he has to play ball with the whites and the rich minorities and the Jews. He's got to play ball with them. He's got to play ball. He's got to be like, all right, you're right, massa. You're right. I'm Latinx, massa. Probably shouldn't say that. I'm just out here trying. But it pisses me off. It's racist. It's racist or ethnicist to decide that a term should be used for a group of people when you can look up a poll of those people and find that only 4% of it prefer that term. It's not cool to call people that. It pisses me off. I love Hispanic people. I have a bunch of Hispanic friends. None of them use that term. And that's actually representative of the actual Hispanic population in the United States. Some jackass saying it at a college is just a jackass at a college. It's being selected like in their bubble. Sure, I'm sure that the guy says Latinx because these people are conformists. They know that they have to say certain things to continue with their career. They know the politics behind this place. Okay. Illegal immigrant, terms like that. You say the term illegal immigrant, some person will tell you, no, you can't say that. You got to say undocumented. Sounds better. It does sound better. It sounds better. But, again, it's deciding a rule for someone, and someone could say it's illegal or it's offensive. Humans aren't illegal. Yeah, you skipped grammar class because the word illegal doesn't describe the human being themselves. It describes their status as an immigrant. So saying an illegal immigrant, if you say an illegal, then, that's kind of, it's kind of a fucked up way to say it. But if you say a legal immigrant, what you're saying is you are an immigrant who is illegal in reference to being an immigrant. So your immigration status is illegal. And, illegal, undocumented, regardless, Joe Biden's putting you in a cage and nobody fixed that problem. So I don't think it matters that much. They get all bent up about the shit that doesn't matter, about the symbols and how people talk. And then they're bombing Syria and killing children. And nobody gives a But I digress. Public school, government school. Don't have much to say about that. It's government school. You call it public school, sounds good. Public, it's the commons, things are good. No, it's garbage and there's drugs and it's training kids to just be lapdog workers for the upper class. Rich people, they don't go to public school. They go to private school. They got it. Because they know that that's where you go to network with the right people, to get into the right college, so that you can be a rich person and you can shit on everyone else. It's all about power. It's all about who has the power, who the people with the power want to control, how they want to control how other people think, how they want to control symbols and what people can have what symbols. And, like the people who use Latinx, they don't care what those dirty Hispanics think. They don't care that they don't like them. They clearly don't care. If they cared, when you told them that only 4% of people, as I've done many times, only 4% of Hispanic people like the term, they would stop using the term when they become aware of that information. From Gallup. It's not from like some right. This isn't a One America News poll. Okay. This is from Gallup. This is real. 4% of Hispanics use this term, and yet it's the preferred term. It's fucked up. And it shows how certain people in society wield power over others. And in this case, it's Hispanic Americans that are suffering at the hands. And honestly, the Hispanic people who will play ball and let themselves be called Latinx, maybe they truly in their hearts like the term for some reason, those are the ones that are going to be accepted in that group. That's what it is. These groups, they're not white, they're not Jewish, they're not black. They are a multicultural upper class that thinks a certain way, and they don't want anyone that doesn't think like them around them. And it happens to be tied, just like with journalists being from the upper class, the professors are from the upper class. That's what it is. And just like all aristocracies in history, they don't care as much about ethnicity. They just care about you having blue blood, about you having a proper birth, that you come from a good family, a good neighborhood. And what that essentially means is that you were born rich. They've just like refined the process to a certain way to hide the fact that there's still an aristocracy, that there's still generational wealth that retains itself. They want you to use their words for things and think the things that they don't like are bad. It's how they it's how they control purity tests on each other to see how they are. Okay. You bend the knee. I want you to bend the knee. Wear the rainbow flag. Use Latinx. You can have an Israeli flag, never mind the genocide. You can glorify mass murderers like Obama. It's fine because he's cool. You can have flags of the United States and never mind the Native American genocide. Who cares what they think? They don't have any representation in government. We don't give a shit. But you can't have a Confederate flag. It's offensive. Your region is bad and you shouldn't be proud of it. You can only be proud of where you're from if you're a red-blooded American, not with any of that southern muddy shit. That you got to be from the north. From the north. You got to be up there. The American flag is the only symbol you want. And that symbol is good. It represents freedom, democracy. You got to adhere to my ideologies and my values. Your own. So next time someone finds something offensive or wants to control how someone else speaks or how they feel about a symbol, just ask why in your head or out loud. Ask what else should be offensive if a similar line of reasoning is followed. If you can't have the Confederate flag because of slavery, what other symbols can't you have? Because it's basically all of them. You want to tweet about how the Confederate flag is bad on your iPhone that's made by literal slaves today, that you played a part in having enslaved because you're purchasing the products? That makes sense, right? Let he who is without sin cast the first stone.